Hi, I'm Heather-Marie Montilla, and you are watching PBS Books. Thank you for joining us. PBS Books, in collaboration with WNET, is pleased to host this conversation with award-winning writer Claribel Ortega, author of The Golden Frog Games, a sequel to Witchlings. We are so excited tonight because tonight launches our 2023 partnership with the Library of Congress to promote their National Book Festival. Let's take a moment to hear from the Librarian of Congress, Dr. Carla Hayden.
I'm Carla Hayden, Librarian of Congress, and I want to give a thank you to PBS Books for supporting the National Book Festival. Hope you can join us in Washington and online for this year's festival on Saturday, August the 12th.
Well, if you live in the New York metropolitan area, then don't miss the 2023 Library of Congress National Book Festival. It is on Saturday, August 12th from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. The festival is free and open to everyone. It is a quick drive, maybe not so quick, but it is a drive or a train ride away on the Excella. For a complete schedule of the 2023 Library of Congress National Book Festival, you can go to loc.gov/bookfest. But if you can't be there in person, do not worry. You can stream two of the main stages live from the comfort of your own home and curate your own experience. Well, now through August 31st, PBS Books and PBS stations will host a series of 10 virtual events with 11 authors. They will also be available on demand on PBS Books and the National Book Festival website. Well, today's conversation features Claribel Ortega to discuss her work and involvement in the festival. Her latest book, The Golden Frog Games, continues the stories of three protagonists on adventures in a magical world. Let's welcome in Claribel. Hi, Claribel. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. It is so great to have you here. I actually want to read a little bit and share with people a little bit about your background. So if you can just hold on 1 second, because you are this outstanding writer. You are a New York Times bestselling and award-winning author who writes middle grade and young adult fantasy novels inspired by your Dominican heritage. Claribel co-hosts the Bad Author Book Club podcast, which is wonderful, and is a contributing author for Marvel. Ortega's work has been featured in BuzzFeed, Bustle, and Deadline. Her debut middle grade novel, Ghost Squad, is being adapted into a feature film. Ortega's graphic novel, Frizzy, illustrated by Rose Bussamra, won the 2023 Pura Bullprey Children's Author Award, which is amazing. Congratulations. And Ortega's new sequel to Witchlings is what we're discussing today. It's The Golden Frog Games, and it'll be featured in the 2023 National Book Festival. Welcome, Claribel.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, we're so excited to have you here, and it's so wonderful to be able to discuss your books, your work. I mean, I feel like you've just had a debut novel success after success in a very short period of time. And I just want to congratulate you and say, we're so happy for you and so thrilled to have you on PBS Books.
Oh, thank you so much. It has been a short, but sort of like not so short journey, because that's just sort of what people see, right? And I was also a pandemic debut. My first book came out in April of 2020. So that was an experience.
Yeah, and I'm sure that was a bit of a challenge, because I know at PBS Books, our work completely changed during the pandemic. And so it must have been, were you doing virtual interviews during that period?
Yeah, I actually had to have my book launch virtually. I was one of the very first virtual book launches, because very beginning of April, that's when sort of everything really started. Obviously, all the bookstores were closed, and I tried to make it as fun and interactive as I could. And it turned out really great. I partnered with a independent bookstore in New York City, Books of Wonder, to be the bookseller of the event, and I tried to make it feel as in person as possible. Luckily, I already had sort of an online community at that time because I documented pretty much my entire writing and publishing journey up to that point. So I was in a good position given that everything was a little different than what I planned for.
Completely. Well, it's amazing to hear that, and then to see you here with accolades and your journey, and hopefully we'll get to hear more about your journey. So for those people who have not yet read Witchlings, can you briefly describe the story? Obviously we need to know a little bit about the story of Witchlings before we get to the Golden Frog Games.
Sure. So the first Witchlings book was really inspired by a question. And that question was, what would happen if the sorting hat from Harry Potter put you nowhere? And I really wanted to explore what it meant to feel left out, especially as a diaspora writer. It's something that plays a big role in my life and in my writing. And I wanted to explore that through the lens of magic. So in Witchlings, the three main characters, Seven Salazar, Thorn LaRue, and Valley Pepperhorn, are all sorted as spares in their town of Ravenskill. And being a spare means you don't belong anywhere. You are a leftover. In order for them to not lose their magic, they need to defeat a legendary wolf-like monster called the Night Beast, or they'll be turned into a trio of toads before the time runs out that they have to solve the impossible task. So it's definitely an adventure. There's a lot of whimsy and sort of like quirky magic, but it's also about community and world building and the importance of sticking together. And there are a lot of more serious issues tackled throughout the series as well.
So the Golden Frog Games, it continues your magical world of witchcraft and adventure, as you alluded to. What inspired you to write the sequel, and what is the main plot?
Sure. So Witchlings was always planned to be a series. There's actually 3 books planned right now for publication and 4 more that I'm working on. The Golden Frog Games, I love magical competitions, and I knew that I wanted at least one of the books to revolve around a magical competition. What happens in book 2 is another one of the witchlings, Thorn LaRue, who is an expert at costura magic, which is basically fashion magic, becomes the youngest and only spare to ever compete in the Golden Frog Games, except her fellow champions, which are what the competitors are called, start being turned into stone. And because the witchlings are not very well liked in the town, they start getting blamed for everything. And they need to figure out who is behind this stonification hex, as it's called in the book, before Thorn is the next victim.
So I was really impressed with how you've developed these characters, right? They're characters that they're quirky, but you fall in love with them, and each has its strengths and its weaknesses. Each has its successes and failures. Could you talk a little bit about Seven, Valley, and Thorn?
Sure. So I came up with 7 first. Actually, the idea for Witchlings, on aside from the question that I mentioned before, came to me in a really weird way, which is that the first line of the book sort of just appeared in my mind, which is very lucky. I was like, thank you, brain. I don't know if that will ever happen again. But the idea of this character 7, who was a 12-year-old witch who was already sort of really confident in what she wanted and really good at school and at magic, but then sort of got that ripped away from her. I wanted to start off with a character who was a girl and who was confident in herself and her abilities, and then put her through challenges to make her realize that she actually doesn't have everything figured out. And in order to do that, I introduced these other 2 characters that would challenge her in really specific ways. So for Thorn, she's dealing with her own secrets when she enters the story. She's a little bit too bubbly and excited for Seven's liking. And then Valley is her bully and has been her bully for years. So she is thrown into this precarious situation with a new girl in town who kind of gets on her nerves and her lifelong bully. And Seven needs to sort of work with them in order to solve this impossible task. So I created the 3 witchlings to sort of challenge each other, help each other grow, but they're also a reflection of who I am and who I've been in different points of my life as well. So they're very close to my heart because of that. and they are very different. And I thought that I love ensemble casts and sort of when characters bring their own special magic and ability to a team.
Well, I also enjoyed learning about the family impact, right? And each of them in their own way, they still, well, they're a coven, they also have a really strong connection and support from members of their family. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of family?
Sure. So I'm Dominican American, and I try to write things that are reflective of my own sort of life and upbringing. And for me, it would, sorry, I have a little dog, so you might hear him making noise from time to time. So for me, it was really a reflection of my own upbringing and my own family. And I wouldn't be writing honestly if I didn't write about sort of like a family that was very involved in what was going on. I wanted Seven to have really supportive parents, but also to sort of show the conflicts that can happen in families. Like Valley's home life is not the greatest. Thorn is dealing with grief in her own family. So while I wanted to show that sort of like supportive side and show parents being very much present in a middle grade story, I also wanted to show that families aren't perfect and that bad things can happen, but that you could still have a support system, and family can look a lot of different ways. And friendship can really sometimes be a stand-in for that when family doesn't, things in your family aren't exactly working out.
So it's interesting you mentioned or focused a lot of that on friendship, because I think friendship and the power of community are really two of the focal themes in this book. There are moments when friendships, in fact, are fractured, but still the friends come through for one another. And it happened a few times. So I was wondering if you could reflect on one of your favorite stories that exemplifies that.
So I don't know about you, but when I was 12, I had a lot of friendship drama in my life. Sort of like school revolved around that, and aside from like my schoolwork and wanting to do really well, like friendships and relationships were really important to me. And friendship breakups were so devastating, and I think can still be so devastating well into adulthood. And I kind of wish I had read more books with friendship breakups in them, or difficult friendships that have sort of challenges thrown into them as a child, to sort of realize like, oh, it's okay to have conflicts with my friends. Like having a fight doesn't necessarily mean I have to hate them forever. And when we meet Seven, she actually has a best friend named Poppy, and their dream was to be in this really powerful coven together called House Hyacinth. And a little bit of a spoiler, but Poppy ends up getting into House Hyacinth, and Seven is obviously a spare. So sometimes those friendship breakups can come from us growing in different directions, which is such a common thing to happen when you're growing up. You change, you move, you're so many things about you can grow and be different from when you met a friend. And I sort of wanted to show what that looked like, and not make it sort of about two girls hating each other just because. I wanted it to be about two friends who grew apart, and nobody's really at fault. Maybe they both made mistakes because they don't necessarily know how to navigate something like a friendship breakup, but it's such a real thing for me, and it was such a huge deal for me as a kid. So I really wanted to talk about not just the importance of friendship, but that friendship is complicated and it can be messy, and that is okay, and it's totally normal.
Well, I think that it's for me as a reader, but also knowing the target is middle grade, it was really wonderful to see that, because I do think that drama, right? There's so much drama, especially in middle school years. And for someone to be able to be like, okay, well, I can be in drama with a friend, but still be there for that friend, right? Mm-hmm. And that happened a lot, and not a lot, but often. And it was this through line that I hope makes young people, as they read your books, and I'm sure will, think about their friendships and what it means. So let's talk about you and your Dominican heritage, and how it maybe influenced or impacted your story.
So I don't know that I ever sort of set out to say, okay, I'm definitely going to write about my Dominican culture and heritage, but it's such a big part of my upbringing that when I talk about a kid, when I'm writing about a kid, it just sort of comes naturally to me to write about it through the perspective of a young Dominican American child. So I talk about my favorite foods. If you've read anything from Coast Squad to the Witchling series to Frizzy, there's always mention of food. I talk about music, and I also talk about the dynamic between family members. One of the reasons why Seven's family is so supportive and there is because that was my experience. I come from a very, very large family, and there's a lot of sort of leaning on one another during difficult times. And I wanted Seven to have that support system at home, even if sort of the world outside was against her all the time.
So let's talk about some of your favorite Dominican foods, because as someone who I'm married to someone who's Dominican, my kids are Dominican. I found this to be really fun because I felt like you almost had like hidden breadcrumbs throughout for a reader, for a Dominican reader who would know, and it doesn't stand out necessarily to someone else, but they're there. So do you want to discuss some of the little treats or gems you left for the readers?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I do talk a lot about food. My very favorite food in the whole world, not just Dominican food, is something called tres golpes. So it's mango. You have fried cheese, you have salchichon, which is like a fried summer sausage, and then fried eggs with usually some sauteed onions on top. Usually have it for breakfast. I would eat it all day long if I could. I definitely mentioned that in the books. Also, all the spells in the Witchling series are in Spanish, and Spanish is my first language. And going to school visits and, having siblings who spoke no English until they were much older than I was when I first started speaking English, I sort of knew what it felt like and have seen what it feels like to not understand what's going on in the classroom or to be even left out of the classroom. And I wanted those moments, the spells being in Spanish, those moments of sort of Dominican culture for kids who spoke Spanish to read that and feel like they got something that maybe their classmates wouldn't. I wanted them to feel maybe like the smartest kid in the room for once, and give them that chance and have sort of like a dialogue with them that was like a special language just between us, because I know what it feels like to not speak the language and be in this classroom and be really confused and lost and scared. And a lot of kids have mentioned that they love the spells in Spanish, so that makes me really happy.
It's almost like giving them a superpower. And we've always said that. My kids were raised bilingual, and we always tell them, you have a superpower, right? You can speak and read in both languages. So I as I was reading, I definitely thought the reader would have a superpower if they knew Spanish. And I love that you created that for Spanish speakers. So you have also touched another place that I really love, which is librarians. So in your 12 towns, librarians like Miss Dewey and Amber, they have a very special role, and are revered. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So in the world of the 12 towns, librarians are the only witches that are allowed to have familiars. So they will have these magical animals that are sort of their companions. Miss Dewey has a hummingbird made of light called Almanac. And Ambert, as you mentioned, actually has a squirrel named Tidbit, who we meet a little bit more in the third book, actually. Librarians actually play a huge role in the world of the 12 towns that has yet to be discovered, and will be talked about and delved into more in Witchlings 3. And
not to skip too far away from the book, but did you have a librarian in your life that had a particular influence on you?
Yes, I've had many librarians. I mean, for me, I grew up in the South Bronx, and I grew up going to the Hunts Point Library and then later on to the library in sort of the Soundview area. And libraries were really my safe space. I wasn't necessarily allowed to play outside too long, just because of the neighborhoods that I grew up in, but going to the library was okay. And I was forever asking the librarians for recommendations and talking to them all the time. And I've always loved to read. I've always loved to write. So in, the South Bronx, in a place where I wasn't necessarily always allowed to be on my own and do things as a kid and explore sort of my world, the library was my safe space to do that and introduced me to so many books and things that I love till this day.
It's wonderful. Witchcraft and magic are central to your stories. What research did you do to draw and create this magical system? And then also, if you could talk about archaic magic.
Sure. So I'm a former reporter, so I love to do any sort of research and deep diving into the world of my books before I get started. Witchlings does take place in a secondary world. So everything from the technology to the system of measurement is something that I sort of like had to make up. There was a lot of like brainstorming, a lot of reading about the places where the books were set, because actually Ravenskill is based on Peekskill, New York, and the 12 towns are based on the river towns along the Hudson River. So there was a lot of geographical inspiration. So I read a lot about the about sort of New York and the river towns, and I used that to help inspire a lot of the witchlings world. And in terms of witchcraft, I sort of use the basis of magic for most of the magic. Like I said, I use a lot of Spanish. But I didn't delve too much into sort of like real witchcraft, if that makes any sense. Only because I didn't want it to get too scary for the kids. I wanted it to have a little bit of balance there, right? But yeah, it was just a lot of sort of like researching the geography of where the river towns were based on, and then also just a lot of brainstorming and making things sort of like as funny and whimsical and interesting as I could. I loved weird books growing up, so I was like, how can I make this weirder? So like for Edgar Allan Toad, for example, he's a toad, right? And he's in the book. First of all, got to give him a great name. It's a pun, but he also has a mustache because that'll just like level it up a little bit. So I tried to take things from our world and sort of reset them with magic and make them a little bit more whimsical and fun and funny.
So those of you who are not from the New York City metro area, the Hudson River goes north from New York City, and you have river towns on the Hudson River overlooking the Palisades. And I recognized, as you were talking about Ferry Town, and it was something on the Hudson, like Hastings on, right? Like I was like,
on pumpkins.
Yeah. I was like, oh my goodness. Like, so I felt very familiar as I was reading it. And I'm sure people in the New York City metropolitan area and will recognize it as well. And I do think that's fun. And there is so much history. I mean, Washington Irving is that his hometown was there, Irvington, right? So you must have learned a lot. I feel like there's such ghost stories and witch stuff that you hear as you go up the Hudson. So speaking of scary things that happen, in the book, you have Seven is often reading a story. She's often reading Delphinium Larkspur's diary. Can you discuss?
Sure. So a little bit of a spoiler. If you haven't read book one, maybe put your earmuffs on. But Seven it discovers that she is going to be a town uncle, which means she can speak to animals. And she finds this hidden diary from this witch called Delphinium Larkspur hundreds of years ago. And she was able to do the same thing, except that she could speak to monstros, as they're called in the 12 towns, and Seven's able to do the same. And she is keeping that a secret because Delphinium was sentenced to death for being able to do this. It was considered unnatural. And so Seven is really afraid. She's not sure what to do. And she found this diary, and she's sort of like reading through it to see what this witch's fate was. And there's a lot of sort of talk of what it means to be a monster, be monstrous in this series. And I wanted to talk about how sometimes the people or the things that are ascribed monstrosity aren't necessarily the bad people in this world. And that goes back to a little bit what I was talking about before with being like a diaspora writer. So Seven makes this connection between her and this sort of ancient witch and this magic that she's not sure what's happening within her. At the same time, there's this archaic magic, right? This like really old and sort of evil magic that's erupting in the 12 towns. And Seven's wondering if somehow she's responsible or if she's connected to it in any way.
Well, I'd like to reset the conversation for those of you out there who are just joining us. I'm Heather-Marie Montilla. You are watching PBS Books, and it is my pleasure here today to be presenting our first conversation for the Library of Congress National Book Festival. I'm here in collaboration with WNET, and we are talking to award-winning author Claribel Ortega. She's discussing her latest book, which is The Golden Frog Games, and it is a sequel in the Witchlings series. Back to the conversation. Okay, so we've talked about a lot, but how could we not talk about raccoons? I love the raccoons, but raccoons are not always friendly animals. I mean, and you allude to that. So can we talk a little bit why raccoons, the names of the raccoons, and they stand up for, they help her too. Like, can we, Seven, that is, can we talk about the raccoons?
Sure. So I think raccoons are really funny and adorable, but as you said, they're not always friendly. So they can be quite dangerous, actually. And so in the 12 towns, raccoons are one of the few animals that are both animals and monsters. So they're half and half. They can live in the cursed forest, but they can also live among witches. And because of that, and because of Seven's sort of broken magic, right, where she can talk to animals but also to monsters, they were sort of the perfect sidekick for her, on aside from Edgar Allan Toad, who, you know, I can't give him too many lines because he's old and tired. But the raccoons were a perfect little troop. She has 10 of them that follow her everywhere and sort of like clap for whatever she does and says. I just had so much fun with them. I wanted to really bring some levity also to the book because we do talk about a lot of heavy topics, and Seven is going through so much. There's so much changing in her world and with her magic, and she's so stressed out and afraid that I felt like I needed to give her something that would also help her and boost her up, and that would lighten the mood when things got a little heavy in the book as well. And then I just named them after food because food is a big motivator in my life.
A fellow foodie. So you've created this incredibly complex and magical world. You have the 12 towns, they're competing, but you've really created a magical community where 3 tweens are grappling with societal issues. Can we talk about some of these issues, and what is your goal in including these issues?
Sure. So one of the main things, if you've read Witchlings, is this sort of classism that's going on, right? So obviously spares are sorted as the outsiders of their world. It's sort of built into their magic. And on the surface, Ravenskill in the world of the 12 towns looks like this really magical, whimsical, beautiful, fun, funny place. But right there in the very beginning, there's already this like terrible, insidious part of their magic and culture. And people don't really question it because it's just tradition and it's just how things work. And it doesn't start to be questioned until things start to unravel. And one of the really obvious sort of like markers of this difference and in this conversation is the place called the Hill in Ravenskill, which is basically where all the wealthiest witches live. And when I describe the Hill, I talk about how the roads are wider and the air is warmer and sweeter and everything just sort of looks brighter and well maintained. And all of that takes magic to maintain. And Seven sort of wonders why there are some witches in their town that have so little, and then there's this excess on the Hill. And I'm obviously talking about a lot of real world issues and sort of economic disparity and how I see those divides growing in our world and how I see workers being mistreated and not paid as well. I'm really excited about all the unions that are forming and striking, and Witchlings is really a reflection of that, and really a reflection of what's going on in our world today. And a lot of people, I think, see like the very cute pastel covers and don't realize sort of how deep the issues really get. But I think in book 2, and especially going into book 3, they will realize very quickly how serious the things they're dealing with are.
Well, I even thought you discuss, it almost seemed like a social program, right? You had beautiful housing for spares, but in one case, some of the spares housing had been burned, but yet it still looked beautiful on the outside, but it was a spell. It had been damaged and not fixed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there are social programs that very much from the outside, they look great in society, but when you actually experience or learn about the ins and outs of those social programs, they're not as shiny and as successful as a lot of the people had intended.
Yeah.
7 discusses with her mentor, I believe it's the Grand, who said that when she first came into power, she wanted to make a big change to get rid of spares. And she was like shut down immediately and told that was not allowed. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I thought that for me in the book, that really stuck out as someone who I also am big into social change and empowerment. And I was like, yes, like we often, when we start, we have these grandiose ideas. and
Yeah.
So can you talk about it?
I think that's part of why I love writing for middle grade kids, right? Because you're at that age where you still, you realize the things that are happening around you, but you still have so much hope for what you can do for the world, and the power that you have just through wanting to make things better. And I really wanted to show that there was a leader in their town who had thought about these things and who realized that it was unjust. I didn't want Seven to be sort of like gaslit by everybody around her. Like, it's no big deal. You're just, you're not as, magical as everybody else. Like, no, this is an actual problem and people want to fix it, but we just can't. It's built in. It's a system that was designed this way. And it's so much harder to change things when everybody around you is telling you that it's impossible, right? So I wanted the Grand to really be a good leader, or at least try her best to be, and not just someone who like pawns everything off on the children to solve, which I feel is so unfair and happens sometimes in narratives involving children. I think the adults should be trying to do their part, even if they're falling short, but at least they're trying. And I feel like that's very realistic to our world. And I just wanted to sort of like talk about all the frustrations that I had and talk about them through this lens of magic, where it wasn't going to be overwhelming for me to revisit over and over again, and also for kids to read. They don't want to be preached down to, but they very much know what's happening around them. And I think that they see that reflection when they read the book.
Okay, let's discuss your process. You are obviously incredibly creative. In a way, I wondered if you had created a big illustration of your world, or circles or Venn diagrams, because it is incredibly complex. Do you have a creative habit? Do you draw in this process? How do you go about creating your worlds?
So my creative process doesn't ever just look one way. I think it depends on the book. One thing that I always do is I make a playlist, usually before I start writing, and I'm updating it as I write. That's what sort of gives me the feel for the book and for what the characters are going through. And I'll go sort of chapter by chapter, and usually have like a song or two for each one. And then I usually release the playlist once the book is out. So that's a really important part of my process. I do have a story Bible that has sort of all of the monsters and the spells and the locations and the characters, because it is so much to get to sort of keep up with. Sometimes a reader will ask me about something in book 1, and I'm like, I do not remember because I wrote that so long ago. Book 2, I was turning in book 2 the week book 1 came out. So I'm always sort of like one step ahead of the reader and thinking about the next thing and the next thing. So keeping everything organized is really, really important for me. I use Scrivener to write in case there's any writers watching. It really helps me with my process, my editing process, and keeping everything sort of neat in one place. And like I said, it's different for each book. I take a lot of walks. I will say that because whenever I get stuck or I feel like I have writer's block, that's sort of like my go-to thing. I take a break first before I try to force myself to write through something. But I usually start with, like I said, the playlist, and then I will write a big synopsis, maybe like 10, 15 pages. And then what I'll do is I'll break that down into a chapter by chapter outline. So every chapter has its own maybe 1-page outline of everything that happens, including sometimes tidbits of dialogue here and there. And then I go in and I just draft, and I hope for the best.
So a typical day, though, do you wake up every day at a certain time and you start writing, or does it all depend? Do you write 7 days a week? Is it?
I try to take weekends off unless I am on like a really tight deadline. I try to really protect my rest time as well. I think it can be really easy to get caught up in the, I'm just going to write this much until the next, book, or until this next thing happens, and that becomes a habit. It forms bad habits of you never resting and just like always working. And you have to have things to pull from in your life in order to be creative. You have to live. So I try to really protect that time. I usually wake up and go to the gym first. I do lifting. That helps me with a lot of the stress associated with publishing. And then I usually like to get to my desk around 10 or 10:30, write for a couple of hours, do some admin, and then write some more until the evening. It doesn't always go like that. Sometimes I'm playing Nintendo Switch for a couple of hours. Sometimes I have to do more admin or meetings or interviews. It depends on the day, but that would be sort of like a typical day in my writing life.
So when you think about the writing for the Golden Frog games, is there a special or most enjoyable or meaningful moment that stands out in your brain?
There are a lot of moments. Some of them I don't know if I should talk about because they're like, I would want the reader to experience it for themselves. But one of the moments that I love the most is the description of sort of like the rivalry and the fight between Goose House and House of Stars, in which they're fighting to throw the big frog ball at the end of the Golden Frog games, and Goose House decides to try to plant explosive magic in House of Stars house so that they'll be disqualified, but they get caught because one of the explosive magics goes off, which is very Goose House of them. And I just love the interaction between the covens, being able to show the covens more, going into Moth House and meeting all sort of like the goth witches was really fun for me to write. I think it's really funny and cute and fun, and I just love describing their different personalities and the aesthetics behind each of the houses. I loved that part of the Golden Frog games for sure.
Do you have any Dominican writers or Latina writers who have impacted you, influenced you in your work?
Yeah, I would definitely say Elizabeth Acevedo's has been like a really big inspiration for me. Watching her sort of rise and success made me feel really hopeful. Also, Julian Randall is a great new middle grade author as well. And yeah, there are so many more of us than there used to be, even like 10 years ago being published, 5 years ago being published. I'm so super excited for the future of Dominican writers in Kidlit and, beyond, and Latina writers in general. I feel like there's so much more room for our stories and so many people who want to read our stories.
So we've heard a little bit about what's up and coming for Witchlings. You said there's one more coming out next year, maybe?
Fall of 2024, yes.
Okay. And then are there more in the works too? And what's on the horizon? What's on the horizon overall for you? Maybe that's an easy question.
Sure. So there hasn't been anything like formally contracted yet, but I have 4 more books planned in the series. So there would be 7 total. And it sort of follows everything that happens after the third book, which is very dramatic, is all I will say. I also am working on another graphic novel, which I am describing as The Sims meets Jumanji.
Ooh, sounds like fun.
Yes.
And can you reveal the illustrator you're working with for that?
Not yet.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll wait for the announcement. All right. So the reason you're on today's show is because you are going to the 2023 Library of Congress National Book Festival. Is this your first visit to the Library of Congress National Book Festival?
It is.
Are you excited? I mean,
I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I think, like we've discussed, libraries are so important. So for me, it's such an honor to be part of this and to be invited and to be able to talk about the Witchlings among so many amazing people. So I'm really, really excited about it.
It goes by so fast. So my one bit of advice is schedule every place you want to go as soon as they release the schedule. And I will say, I went in 2019 for the first time, and I was like, oh my gosh, these are my people. Like, why haven't I come here before? It's an incredible experience. And I hope viewers that are watching, if you can make it to the Library of Congress National Book Festival this year on August 12th, go, because you will have an amazing time. Okay. I always like to give authors a chance to any last takeaways or things you'd like to share with the audience. You've been so incredible, such an incredible guest, sharing so much of your work and your creativity with us today.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, I would just say, to people reading, especially to any Witchlings fans, thank you for sure for supporting this series. And for anyone sort of struggling right now, there's a lot going on in our world. I think books can be an incredible place to turn, to sort of see our world reflected back at us, and to see that things can get better. And also we can just escape somewhere like Ravenskill when we need to.
I love that. Those are great words to end on. Claribel, thank you so much for your creativity, for writing this amazing book that takes readers on an incredible, magical journey. It's really a ton of fun, and really kept me on at the edge of my seat, wondering and hoping that, our three favorite spares make it through and but it's so much fun. So thank you for taking the time and for writing. It's a gift to all of us, and especially I think for young people who are Spanish writers. Spanish speakers rather. I hope that there are more Dominican writers who are able to share their craft and their thoughts and their ideas with everyone, because it's a fun adventure. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, we need to close the program, and I just want to remind everyone that if you can make it to the Library of Congress National Book Festival on August 12th from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m., please go. It's going to be lots of fun. If you can't make it, though, go to loc.gov/bookfest, and you can curate your own experience. Now through August 31st, PBS Books and PBS stations across the nation will host a series of 10 virtual events with 11 authors, and that is also available on the PBS Books website as well as the National Book Festival website. Well, I would be remiss if I did not thank library partners out there, more than 1,800 strong, as well as numerous PBS stations who share this important content with all of you. But most importantly, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us and for being here. A special shout out and a token of appreciation for WNET for sharing this with everyone in the New York City metropolitan area. Well, until next time, I'm Heather-Marie Montilla, and happy reading.